And what we can see from that is, okay, God told us He was going to destroy us. God told us He was going to punish us if we walked away from the covenant. And then He did it. And so when Ezekiel went to speak about future restoration, and Isaiah and Jeremiah, the people could say, you know what, I can get on board with that and believe that. Because just as real as the destruction was, the restoration is going to be just as real. They had lived through the destruction, they had lived through the prophecies about the destruction, and then they lived through the destruction, and now they're having to live through the prophecies of restoration. And so that brings hope that says, you know what, the destruction came, this restoration is going to come as well. And so even in the bad things in our lives, I think this is what we could learn from this, one application, is even in the bad things in our lives, when we see God come through in those things, then He makes a promise of more good and further establishing us. We can trust that, hey, He brought us through this one thing. He can bring us through the next thing. And that's how we can begin to have faith, or build upon our faith, is to understand that God did it before, and He can do it again. If He did the destruction that He said He was going to do, now He's saying He's going to restore us. And I believe He's going to restore us, because He destroyed us like He said He would, and He's going to restore us like He said that He would. And so Ezekiel's message finally is able to turn to one of hope after the destruction of Jerusalem. Any questions so far, or comments, or anything? I want to move in fairly quickly. We're okay? All right, we're doing good. I got 2 thumbs up. I want to go to Ezekiel chapter 4. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go through each and every chapter, but I want to point out some of the more pertinent things in the last couple of minutes that we have here today. Chapter 4, the first 3 verses is kind of this, it's that clay tablet thing. You know, he's to depict how Jerusalem is going to be destroyed. And he does that on this clay thing because, again, he can't talk. So he's just drawing, he's making indentions, he's forming some things, and he's showing how this is gonna all happen. And so that happens in chapter 4, the first 3 verses. And then verses 4 through 8, something weird kind of happens. And Ezekiel's full of weird. Like, you'll hear me say that. I mean it with the utmost respect, but just there's some weird stuff that happens in the book of Ezekiel. And the Lord tells him, lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it. According to the number of days that you will lie upon it, you shall bear their iniquity. For I have laid upon you the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. Because there was 390 years that Israel had lived in iniquity. And so Ezekiel was to lay on his left side for 390 days, 1 day for every year that Israel had lived in iniquity. 390 days. That is like, well, that's more than a year. That's just so weird to me. It's just strange that would be what God would choose to do. And then he says, doesn't stop there, verse 6, and when you have accomplished that, lie again on your right side, and you will bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. So not quite as long. Each day for a year. And so he wasn't just going to lie on his side. He does tell them that he's going to bind him. I will lay bands upon you, and thou shalt not turn from one side to another until you have ended the days of the siege. And so he's to lie on his left side for 390 days, 1 day for each year, the house of Israel. And then he's to lie on his right side for the house of Judah, 40 days, 1 day for each year. And this was what one, I believe it's Charles Dyer, either him or Warren Wiersbe in their book, describe as Ezekiel's action sermons. Because again, I call them object lessons. Another way to phrase it is action sermons. He can't speak. And so God has to get this message to the people in kind of unorthodox ways. One of those was the clay tablet, and the other one was him lying there on his left side for 390 days and his right side for 40 days. All in all, what is that? 435 days. It's like, that's a long time. That's a really long time. 365 days in a year. My math is not great, but another 70 days. That's just like a year and 2 months, 2 or 3 months. That's just crazy. It's just interesting to me. And some of the commentators, they've said that it wasn't a constant laying on his right side, so he would lay on his side, right or left, whichever it was, for a period of about 8 to 10 hours of the day. While people are moving around, while they're working, while they're going to market, while they're doing all this stuff, go back and forth, he's at his house, maybe out in front of his house, laying on his side. And when people pass by Ezekiel's house, they know, hey, that's the prophet. He's laying on his side again. And then they come back the second day, he's laying on his side again. And he's all bound up. And then the 10th day, and then the 20th day, and then the 100th day, and the 300th day. And they're like, he's still on his side. What does this mean? And he had to live out his message. He had to literally show his message. And perhaps the lesson for us today is, how do we show? Does our life follow up with what we say? Now, Ezekiel couldn't say anything. It was his lifestyle or nothing else, because he couldn't talk. We have the ability to be able to speak and be able to talk our message, but do we walk the walk as much as we talk the talk? And so Ezekiel did, and it was commendable to him. Then there's this, more weird part in chapter 4 where he has to make this defiled bread. And with that, it's just kind of gross. He has to make it with human dung. Yeah. And so that's gross. And Ezekiel's objection, though, is that in verse 14 he said, "Behold, my soul has not been polluted, for from even a youth up, even till now, I have not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces, neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth." Now, part of the Mosaic covenant was that they did not eat that which came from man or beast. So the dung, they didn't eat that. They weren't to eat that. Some say that it wasn't maybe part of the ingredients of the bread itself, but that it was cooked over a fire that was made with that. Either way, it's gross. And so hopefully Sister Mari's not in there today making up lunch, cooking it over fire from human poo or Vernie's, whatever. Hopefully that's not happening in there today, which I don't think it is. But Ezekiel's objection to it wasn't that, that's going to taste bad, God. His objection to it was, I followed the Mosaic covenant. This is against the Mosaic covenant. This is against what you have written to us and what you have given to us to do. So it was more that, it wasn't so much that it was a pollution of his taste, it was a pollution of his conscience before God. He had devoted himself to God, devoted himself to live by the law and to follow it to the letter. And here God was asking him to do something different. And that whole idea, Ezekiel was more concerned with what offended his conscience than what displeased his taste. And I love that about Ezekiel. I commend that about him, is because he didn't want to break his covenant with God in this way. It wasn't that it tasted bad or that people would be like, that's weird. It was that my conscience says, God, I've committed this to you. I've devoted this to you. And so he says, God's answer is so God-like. And he says, okay, you can do it with cow dung versus human dung. And it's just like, Okay, thank you, Lord. You know, like, what do you say at that point? I guess it's just like, this is just odd. But the point of it is, Ezekiel was asked to do some very interesting things, very weird things, but he did them. Again, it goes back to what he had received in his call, and that was, you're doing this for me. You're doing this to please the Lord. You're not doing this to please others, because they're going to be displeased with you. They're not going to receive you. But will you do what I've asked you to do? And so for each of us today, the question is the same. Will you do what God is asking of you to do, no matter how much it may displease you, or how much it may displease others? Whether you will be received or rejected because of it, will you do what God has asked of you to do? And I hope today that all of our answers, mine included, is yes. He goes on. I don't have time to go through every one of these. I would love to teach chapter 5 to you and teach chapter 8. There's just so much good stuff. But instead, I will skip ahead here just for a second. So as we've seen, Ezekiel's style of prophetic messages are at times peculiar. Things are a little bit weird. His messages are clothed in symbol and allegory, and more so in Ezekiel than in any other book. There's this idea, or there's this clothing of the message in symbol and allegory. Ezekiel portrays nations, personifies them as animals, plants, specific types of people. In fact, Jerusalem and Samaria in chapter 23 are prostitutes. He likens them to prostitutes. The house of David is a lion's den, or a vine, or a cedar. Egypt is a cedar or a crocodile. He just likens nations to different things. So this allegory and symbols is very prevalent in the book of Ezekiel. Most often he uses the proverb, the parable, and the allegory. That's 3 modes of expression that Ezekiel uses to get his things across. Typical of his proverbs are this one from chapter 18, verse 2. The fathers have eaten sour grapes, and the children's teeth are set on edge. The allegory of the prostitute in chapter 16 is one that actually has a lot of parallel with the new birth. If you look at it, the baby was cast out in the field, and it was dirty. Somebody found it, and they cleaned it up, and then put royal robes on it, and put royal jewels on it. And so we see in that whole cleaning up process, he washed it with water. And so we can see that God found us when we were dirty, and he washed us up, he cleaned us up in the waters of baptism, and he made us his own, and then he's given us we're a royal priesthood for him. And so there's symbolic language and allusions to the new birth that would come into effect in the New Testament. So Ezekiel uses a lot of different things in order to get his point across. Like I said, the object lessons, but also proverbs, parables, allegories, anything that he could do in order to get the message across. God used him in unique ways that he didn't use Isaiah and Jeremiah. And so what it lets us know is that there's many different modes of communicating God's message. Many different ways and methods of communicating God's message in the world today. And what are some ways that you see that we are using in our modern day to get God's message across? What ways are available to us, or what ways do we see that we're doing that? Anybody?
Social media can be used.
Right. Very good.
Used either way.
Sure, it can be used either way, but social media, very good. Just making our stuff. Well, what we're doing today, we're going to put it on YouTube for other people to be able to hear, those students that can't come. And so, churches can do YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all those types of things in order to get the message of God across, either whether it be just a typed post or a video, and getting the message out there. It's very good. We can use the communication means that are available to us. I think also songs and books and music, that can be a powerful way for us to get God's message across in this day as well. Is God using us and the talents that he's given. You know, some are talented to write and gifted to maybe create skits and plays and dramas and all of that in order to get the message across. Graphic design, God has gifted people artistically in order for his message to get across. So whatever means we use, his message is the most important in getting that across. And so we see Ezekiel's example. He'll just use whatever he has available to him, and I think we can do that as well. And so any questions today before we end our session? I know we've kind of flown through Ezekiel. I would love to spend more time, but any questions at all? No? All right, well, that's us for Major Prophets. Then you will have next, again, I mentioned Jim doing historical books for Brother Beak is away. So have that next. All right, thank you.